Clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
You were in your Mac settings the whole time. You weren't
Yeah,
looking
I was
Zoom.
looking. I mean, listen, we know that I am not a Gen Z or whatever. I am Gen X, and I mastered tape players and CD players back in the day, Reagan. That was the technology. I'm pretty good with my phone now, but and I'm pretty tech savvy when it comes to like websites and that sort of stuff. But like devices is where I think my generation and your generation really kind of divided, right? I think is the device side, because our devices were very pale, but we had computers, right? So we were pretty good with those things. And I'm good with online stuff because my first job, one of my first real jobs was I worked for a website that was one of the first 10,000 websites on the entire internet.
Whoa.
You can believe that. Like we were like 9,100 and something live HTTP protocol on the internet back in
Did
1998.
did you escape that before the .com bubble burst?
I did. We got bought out by monster.com.
Oh, nice. Which I
That was a
think
company
is that
called
GoDaddy now?
no, Monster was the job board. Remember they had the
Oh,
job
that's
board, and then
right.
so
That's
we were
right.
virtual relocation, and I was working in Beaverton, just outside of Nike, really. And it was funny because it was the same year I ran for state house and lost in the primary. When I met your dad, it was the same year.
I just imagine Brian Iverson at the beginning of his TV making career, manufacturing the videotape and rushing it over to the network to get it on air just in time, like an episode of The West Wing when
Dude, we
they're
made
shooting, when they've got
actual tapes, like actual tapes. Yeah, like we had
there's
to
an
send
episode of The
them.
West Wing where they
Oh, it
do
was
that
cool.
and they
Yes.
have like an hour to deliver it and they finally just shoot something straight to camera onto the videotape and then they got to run the videotape over to the network to get it on air. And that's what I imagine you doing. So,
It was so crazy. Yes, we used to do that, but the internet changed all of that stuff, man. And I remember like when Napster was going out of business, like our internet at the office, like because everybody was downloading music like crazy on Napster. And the CEO of the company came out of his office one day and he was just like yelling. And this guy's great. And some people that know Scott Taylor in Portland that listen to this, they might know Scott from back in the day, good Republican donor too, but he comes out of his office and he's like, "You mother effers, stop goddamn downloading music and get on the phones and sell some shit." And it was so great because all of us like looked up from our cubicles and it was pretty hilarious. It was a fun time in the internet world. But yeah, Monster bought us in 2000, like probably 6 months, 5 months before the bubble burst.
mhm.
And then I left Monster in December 2020. So I made a couple of bucks. I mean, nothing big, but I made a couple of dollars on some stock, and then I went to another startup with Scott, and then that startup we kind of floundered until 9/11 hit, and then that pretty much I think I hung out for till about February of 22, and then I graduated with my master's degree, and then I took off to Europe for 6 months. And I left the job and kind of hung out, and then I figured out where things go. But that was fun time.
Well,
But
this
now
is the episode,
I know,
Brian.
right? We've done the
You hit
intro. There's a
record.
better intro.
I We're never recording another intro again, Brian. We're gonna just do it this way. I think they call it cold open in the business, where you just roll right into it, and I think it's good. It's better than what I've been doing. We did 25 episodes of that. Let's change it up for the next 25. So speaking of things that feel like they were 100 years ago, Jimmy Carter just turned 100. He's the first U.S. president to live to 100. Obviously, the early presidents, they didn't have such great health care. They didn't last very long. Some of them were shot. obviously. Jimmy Carter, neither of those. He had access to great health care. He wasn't shot and lives to be 100. Any thoughts on that, Brian?
I mean, well, I still say this. He's the greatest president after being president that I think we've had. I can't really think of a lot of really good presidents that became really good statesmen and just really good, people post presidency. I think that because his presidency was an abject failure, but being since he was president, he's actually, done a lot of good things, right? I mean, all the stuff he did for Habitat for Humanity and all the things. So that's just pretty cool actually to see him live to be 100. That's pretty awesome.
I will use this opportunity to plug a podcast that I listened to the last couple of months called Landslide, and it is all about how the Republican realignment in the 70s with Ronald Reagan into the 80s. One of the episodes focuses on Jimmy Carter, and because he wasn't the favorite to be the Democratic nominee, he kind of came out of nowhere, and he actually drugged the Democratic Party a little bit more conservative. He ran on a much more conservative platform than a lot of Democrats had run on previously. So I'd encourage people to listen to that. It's Landslide. Very good podcast. Still has that, NPR Democratic spin on it a little bit, but I was able to get through that. And there's a lot of good info in there and a lot of clips and interviews and stuff like that. That was really good.
Did they buy the rights to Fleetwood Mac for the podcast? Do you hear Landslide?
No,
Oh, that's a bummer. Couldn't afford it, huh?
probably not. Podcasting budgets, as you know, Brian,
Yeah.
our budget is very large. We license music all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I put out a couple feelers and they were all too expensive.
Speaking of things that are expensive, Iran fired like 400 missiles at Israel today, killed 0 Israelis and 1 Palestinian. Job well done there by the Iranian government.
Well, they're wasting our money, so what the hell, right? Is
Well,
it
and I think
Obama's billions, as they say?
the other thing about this too, and I'll put this in the show notes, Willamette Week and the great Nigel understudy, Sophie Peel. She has written about an altered ceasefire pledge that circled that went around. So one city council candidate in Portland is sending this out to all the other city candidates and asking them to just well, what's really hilarious, I don't know if you know this, but typically people who are running for office and especially lawmakers are very so they tend to be careful with their signature, right? They want to read when you circulate a draft of a letter, people won't sign on until they've read it, given their input, and then they'll send you their signature, right? Hey, do you think it would go really well if you just sent out a notice that said, since you signed on to the first version, we will assume that your signature still stands on this letter, as nothing has been fundamentally altered? Would that work, Brian? You think you could just update the letter, keep all the signatures, and send it out?
Yeah, sure.
I don't think it would. I don't think it'd go over very well. And it started a massive like email chain reaction that Sophie's able to get her hands on, and now the Jewish Federation of Portland is weighing in, saying, "Hey, you guys suck." Basically, they're using better language, but it boils down to that. Some of these candidates are politically supportive of forcing Israel not to defend themselves, but they don't like how it looks. And then some of them are really objecting to the content of this letter. And it never ceases to amaze me how a handful of protesters on the far left who do not want Israel to exist, basically, is what they're trying to come up with, are just so heavily focused on making this the number one issue for Portland City Council when it's less than 0.01% of voters' primary city council.
Just silly. I mean, they should focus more on, other things that matter for Portland mayor, like parking tickets and stuff. Because I have my share. Oh yeah, remember that guy on Twitter like posted my thing on posted my parking tickets. That kind of goes into what I was just saying at the beginning of the show. Because the job I got for the new startup was downtown Portland, and parking it was so horrible. And I lived in Beaverton, right? So, and you know me, I ain't riding TriMet. There's no dang way I'm getting on that freaking death trap. So I drove my car, every day down to downtown Portland. I was like near the waterfront. And like clockwork, I think there was this parking officer that just hated me. And so if it was 2 minutes past my parking deadline, I got a ticket. And I probably racked up 15 or 20 parking tickets, which I think is just hilarious. And then somebody on Twitter set up a fake account to post my shit on my parking tickets, which I somehow they're making fun of me having parking tickets. I don't care that she had parking tickets. I just think it's kind of funny that people, that she like has not only just parking tickets, but to the point where she hasn't paid them. All mine are paid. They're not
And
unpaid parking tickets.
your license hasn't been suspended 6
Yeah.
times, and your parking tickets appear to have been in 1999, which was
I know.
I hate to break it to you, Brian, a few years ago.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not
Portland
recent
State.
history.
Portland State. I was at Portland State too. Working on my master's degree, and,
Whoa.
and all the things. But yeah, and Portland State had parking Nazis like crazy too. And apparently they still exist.
Just continues to be crazy. One other follow-up item. Well, we'll do two more items. So I just want to draw attention to, and this is something that I've sort of tried to highlight, the co-chair of Ways and Means, Representative Tana Sanchez, has she in her Willamette Week interview for re-election, she talked about how she's focusing on raising taxes on alcohol. She had a big task force. She tried to pass the tax, couldn't get the votes for the tax, settled for a task force about the tax. My sources in the task force say that if they had held a vote on supporting a tax, it would have failed. So even in the task force that was constructed by Democrats to push this, they couldn't even get agreement there. A lot of it was because the Oregon Health Authority buried a report that says that the taxes don't reduce consumption or alcoholism. They just push people to cheaper products. So it doesn't do what they're claiming it does, raising taxes on it to reduce the consumption. And now she's at Willamette Week, and there's a great clip. I'm going to insert it right after I finish talking here about this, where she basically says, I'm not going to summarize the clip. I'm going to play the clip.
I'm proposing a point of sale tax. And, I don't have a number yet.
So you don't want to say a number?
I don't have a number yet.
And so how are you going to come up with that number?
I'm working on it.
So she doesn't want to specify the amount. Brian, do you think that if she specified an amount, that would show up in campaign materials? Because that's why I think that she's withholding the amount. Because we're talking about this during campaign season when this could be held against Democrats.
Well, she's not going to lose her race. I mean, so I don't know why she would care, except for she just doesn't want to put it out there, would be the biggest thing. I guess other people could use it against Democrats in general, but unless they came out and said they're for beer and wine taxes, I don't think some of the competitive Democrats have espoused any sort of desire to, increase alcohol taxes, at least not that I've heard.
Well, they should be asked, though. If we had journalists that were doing their
Yeah.
jobs, they should be asking, hey, the co-chair of Ways and Means is going to try to pass an alcohol tax in the next session. Are you for it or against it? And if we had an amount, then it would get to be more specific. But I would argue that the Republicans should start running ads, doing mail. If you have town halls left, ask your opponent. If I was a candidate and I got one question to ask my opponent, I would say, do you support raising taxes for any of the following, for anything, right?
Yeah,
Whether it's
right.
alcohol,
Alcohol. Yeah, go through
gas, exactly. And just ask them and get them on the record. Because if you don't win, at least you can pin them on it 2 years for flip-flopping, or you get Democrats that are locked into a no vote now on those taxes, making Democrats' job harder.
Well, and but we know how journalists are. They're too busy trying to talk about abortion because, that's going to change. So I just think you're right. I mean, the tax stuff, I don't know. Maybe either they don't want to do their job or they just don't care, but it's probably a little bit of both. I don't know. But I've heard that if they got their way on the taxes for beer, like a 6-pack of beer, basically it'd be over $20 for a 6-pack of IPA, right? Your local brewer would have to spend somewhere over $20 for a 6-pack. I mean, it's already getting close to that now. I mean, I know Reagan, you're a big drinker. But I think, but I don't even drink much beer. maybe have a beer a week or so. It's not really my alcohol of choice if I were to drink, but I have bought some six packs, in the last 6 months, and for like Deschutes Brewery 6 pack of beer is probably $14. So I mean, it's kind of getting up there anyways. But if you add the amount of tax that they're thinking, it's high. I don't know if your sources gave you if they knew a number since you have all.
I
I have
I
no.
didn't push him on it because I thought it was more important for the Dem side of that conversation to get that number fleshed out, so it didn't seem like because there's obviously some of the participants on this were connected to the alcohol industry, so they'd have representation, and then a lot of them were behavioral health, healthcare, child healthcare, OHA,
Taxes don't.
Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission.
Oh yeah, those guys are all in the know, I'm sure. Um, but they all know this, that the taxes doesn't change behavior if they're really trying to affect behavior. All taxes do is change dollars that go to the NGOs and the nonprofits that say they're working on fixing alcohol behavior because they're, required to, but then everything else goes back into the general fund to pay for whatever it is that they're doing. So we don't need more taxes on alcohol like we need holes in our heads.
Well, speaking of holes in our heads, voters are going to want some holes in their heads after they get all the mail from these swing legislative races that we're about to cover. How's that for a transition, Brian?
Love it. That was one of your
So,
best, Dragon.
thank you. So we're talking about, and we've been going over the congressional statewide races, and now we're here on the key legislative races. Now, we want to start obviously with the upper chamber, the key important chamber, the historic Senate chamber, and then
Cigar
we'll
and
get
whiskey
to
chamber, the cigar and
the
whiskey
House.
chamber. Yes.
Oh, really?
That's what Courtney did. Peter Courtney always called it the cigar and whiskey chamber, or the cigar and whiskey club, and the House is the ballroom or the bar room brawl chamber.
Oh, I can see that. That makes some sense. So, Brian, I think I want to, you're the expert here, having run these Senate Republican caucus, all of the campaigns 2 years ago. And this time you have probably the top two races of the three that are up. So I thought
Well,
you'd be a
great.
good
Let's not talk
person
about them. Okay, moving on to the House.
to have on the podcast, Brian. And so I was glad that you were available to come talk about these, or maybe not.
Yeah, right. I was glad I was available to, I was sworn to secrecy on all these. Well, I pulled a bunch of numbers because I think this is relevant to crosstabs, because I think that's what we do is dive a little bit deeper. And I think, versus
Absolutely.
me giving away secrets or talking about the races, which I'm more than happy to talk about the races. But I think what we should do is take a look at, because there's 3 Senate races, right? We have your dad's race, which he's not allowed to run. So we have Michael Summers in Bend versus Anthony Brodman. So Michael Summers actually lives in Redmond, but they're in the same district, Senate District 27. And if you look at this one, and I know this just because, and you know this, when Senator Knope won this seat in 2020, voter
Yep.
registration was about plus 7.2 to Democrats, somewhere around there, 7.1, somewhere around there, somewhere in that math. And Senator Knope won the seat by 1.5 points. So he covered basically almost 9 points of negative registration. So and then redistricting happened. So that's where I can give people kind of so redistricting, they made it even harder. And when redistricting happened, this seat became a minus 9.1 to Republicans. So the voter registration was a 9.1% more Democrats than Republicans, which is really getting on the outer limits of our ability to win category.
Yep.
And if you're in other states, like they would consider this one a deep blue seat. But in Oregon, we tend to be able to cover certain levels of Democrat majority in voter registration.
And I want to
think
cover that really quickly, Brian, sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt, but
please.
Oregon Republicans are very good at outperforming voter reg. In other states, this has not happened in Oregon in a long time. There are a lot of other states where there are red seats held by Democrats. There are none in Oregon. We have won every seat that has a Republican registration advantage. Now there aren't a ton of them because of the gerrymandering, but of the ones that there are, we have all of them. We also have pretty much we have the vast majority of the ones that are even registration, right? I think the closest one on that one might be House District 53, which we'll talk about in a bit. But even registration is usually considered actually a Republican advantage seat.
Yeah,
It's
I think.
not until you get until the D+5 territory that Dems actually start holding seats, right?
Yeah, yeah. Charlie Conrad and Brian Stout seats are both like close to even voter registration, and they vote 20 points to the right, 15
Not even
points.
hardly contested by
No,
Democrats.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's a
Okay.
good point to bring up. So
Yes.
what I did is I went back and I looked at just the beginning of January 23. So I didn't want to go all the way back to when we did redistricting. So I just did a year and a half. So and I pulled all the numbers, and so this seat has gone now to a minus 9.6. So it's the voter registrations moved another half a point to the left. And I think that would indicate, just the type of people moving to Bend, I think is where that what that really indicates, right? So not only was it tough to begin with, it's even tougher than it was to begin with, because the number one predictor we have that says which way you're going to vote is which way you're registered, right? So that's your number one predictor. The second predictor, which I think our good friend John would say at DHM, is your education
Mm-hmm.
right now. So that's probably your second predictor. So it's a highly educated district with a highly Democrat voter majority. I think that Michael Summers is a way better candidate than Anthony Broadman. I think that Anthony Broadman was not a good city councilor. I think that he's running around. I was at a thing this week where he was touting how Bend is developing the blueprint for solving homelessness. He literally made this case because they say their homelessness is down 5%. And it's so funny because guess whose homelessness rate is up about 5%? The counties.
Yep.
So they just pushed him out of city limits, and he's running around saying they've developed the blueprint. So the blueprint is to make it the county's problem. I think that's the blueprint. But regardless, I'm not going to go into get into that at all. I think Michael's done a really good job. Money wise, Michael's outraised Rodman $300,000 to $256,000.
Yeah,
So
very impressive.
yeah, he really has. I mean, I got to give him a lot of credit for he's got a lot of local support. I mean, he was born and raised there. So my take on this race, and I'll get your take after mine, but I just don't know how you overcome a 9.6% when the district is moving that way, which tells me that the NAVs are pointing that way.
Right.
That's my fear with that district. So
I think the trend is the hardest part, right? All else being equal, if it weren't trending blue, you would have a much better opportunity on this one, right? If it were holding steady or trending Republican, it'd be a lot easier.
Hold that theme, Reagan. We're going to be going back to that trend thing.
Well, and the last one data point, you brought your data points, I'm bringing mine. In
Dang it.
2022 for governor, despite a lot of the state voting for Drazen and Betsy Johnson, this district still voted for Tina Kotek by 8.5 points. And I think that's the number that makes you go, oof, that's going to be hard. That is going to be really tough.
Yep. No, that's a good data point. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So what's the next one, Brian?
Let's move on up to Gresham, because this is kind of similar in regards to voter registration and stuff, but I think there's one key difference here. So Gresham, Senate District 25, we have incumbent Senator Chris Gorsuch, who's raised $266,000. And Republican candidate Raymond Love, who I'm working with. Obviously, people can go look at Orstar and see him paying my company. So I recruited Raymond as well to run for this district. And then I grew up in Gresham. I kind of know it. It's my stomping ground. Gresham Gophers, class of 92. Let's go.
Brian G. Iverson. The G stands for Gresham.
Yeah, that's what it stands for. My grandma still lives there. My dad still lives in the district. I got an aunt that lives in the district in Troutdale. My cousin Jamie Iverson, I doubt she listens to the podcast, but she owns the Bandits Bar and Grill in downtown Troutdale. So I got a lot of family and stuff in this area, so I kind of know the district pretty well. And when I was growing up in this district in Gresham, it was solid Republican. I mean, solid across the board, solid. And I think it was until Karen Minnis lost Troutdale, right? In 08, maybe 06, somewhere in there.
I think they saved her in 08, and then she lost the following year, maybe.
Okay.
No, not in 10. No, you're right. She lost in 08.
I think
They
that's
saved her in 6.
Obama. She got swept up in Obama.
Mhm.
So it used to be solid Republican, and that wasn't that long ago, but it really did move to the left. I mean, it really moved. I think Obama really pushed this district in this area of East Gresham, but I think it's been kind of slowly working its way back. We didn't have Gorsuch in his 2020 race beat our ORP chairman, Justin Wang, by 4.5 points, I think, somewhere around there. So, and it was a -12 at redistricting. But now it's only a -11.6. So it's that trending the other way. And I think what we saw is the 2 House seats, and we were competitive in one last cycle, and we'll talk about the House rates when we get there, but there wasn't a Senate seat in 22. But both those House seats, they lost by less than 1,000 votes each, which represents about 2% of the. So it really has performed in a way that looks like it's trending to the right.
Well, when you look at this district, you go back. It was Lori Monis Anderson before, and I think there was like a dentist guy, Scott Hansen, who came really close to beating her before, and then they redistricted, and so every time this district, they have to keep adding blue areas to keep this district blue. They reinforce this district, and most recently, I think they cut some pieces off of it and shove them into what I think is now Bonham's district, just to keep this area blue, because it's so important for them to have those areas of East County. Because if the East County seats collapse, their majority basically collapses. They get cut down to maybe a 16, 14 if they're lucky, and a 31 or 32 seat in the House, right? So they have to keep reinforcing those areas with the bluest precincts they can, and they do it every redistricting.
So instead of keeping Gresham whole, because Gresham should be 1 Senate seat,
right?
You should have 1 senator. No, they have 3. Because they have to cut, like you said, Senator Bonham, they cut off all the east side because the vote's red. Yep. And they gave it to him. And now the Senate seat moves from Gresham all the way to 174th, 172nd into Portland. Right. That's the only way that they keep it blue. So, but this seat, I will say, and then you brought up some other data points that what we really like about this seat, voted for Vasquez just recently in the spring, 68%.
Yep.
Against Mike Schmidt. Huge.
That's really good.
Every single precinct voted for Vasquez, including those ones in Rockwood. So that's why we like the seat. And then your other data point with Christine Drazen, she only lost the seat by 50 votes to Tina Kotek. And Betsy Johnson took 4,000 votes. So whether the Democrats like it or not, this seat's up for election.
Those Betsy Johnson voters, I think, are the swing votes, right? Because you have Drazen and Kotek even basically in this district, right? 50 votes, that's nothing. And then you've got these 4,000 or so Betsy Johnson voters, right? Those, I guarantee you just tip all those over. If all of those folks vote for Vasquez, that's how you get that big margin, right? That's how you really shift that margin pretty substantially. So if Raymond, can, not to blow up any of your campaign plans here, but you might want to try to find those voters, Brian. Hopefully you're working on that. But that's my advice to you as a, kind of a wise old political
buddy.
consultant. Talk to the swing voters. I think here's the thing too. This is one of those seats where are people expecting it to flip? No. If we had a really good election night, this would be an indicator Democrats are having a bad night if Republicans win this seat,
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Yeah.
And I think every dollar you spend here probably costs Democrats $3 to $5 or more, right, to hold. So every time you spend $1 on TV, they probably got to spend 5 or more just to make sure they win. This is, Kennemer and Meek all over again, where they can't match it. If we match them dollar for dollar, we win. That's a lot of times what'll happen. They have to beat us. They have to outspend us pretty big in order to win. And I think that's what they'll have to do here. If they want to hold this thing, they're going to have to spend really unhealthy amounts of money.
Well, and Senator Gorsuch is, he's been there forever. So, I mean, back in, I think 10 or 12, he was elected in the state house and then, came over to the Senate. So he's definitely been around forever. He's a triple dipper. So he's, been hired and retired from 3 different public agencies and all the things that you think of that make up the stuff, but he's still been winning. So it's still an uphill battle no matter what at the end of the day. And I think money will matter here.
Yeah. So then we go to
and then on the money front, I'll just point out.
Oh yeah, please.
SEIU did just drop $500,000 in a broadcast buy for Gorsuch. So SEIU seems it to be a problem. So if you don't believe the polling, believe the money. That's what I always say.
Is SDLF out of money or something? Why can't they buy TV?
I think that, who knows? I mean, I think SEIU just thinks that, Chris Gorsuch they'll probably say he aligns with our values.
I would be shocked.
I'm sure you will after you give him $500,000.
He doesn't seem like a union Democrat to me. I mean, he's just, one of those union busting guys I hear.
So we'll see on that one. I think the deciding factor will be money at the end of the day here. I think that, and then ultimately, let's just be real. I mean, 11.6 points in negative voter registration is a big lift, right? That's a big lift. Totally. That would probably be, I would have to go back and look. I don't know if that would be our largest, overcoming of a deficit of voter registration that we've won, at least in a long time that I can think of. So
since some of those House seats in 2010, which were those similar margins in those similar areas, for sure.
So I think that would be a big lift there. And I think, the other part that this district is very interesting is, it's obviously a plus Biden, district. So how people see Kamala Harris versus Biden Trump is going to be interesting. Turnout's going to be a very interesting factor here because the congressional seat is over, right? Maxine Dexter is going to Congress. There's no real big, a driver of voter turnout besides a campaign like this. So not a lot of activity in the local races. So it's going to be really, we saw voter turnout in the 70s and even into the 50s on NAVs in 22. So we'll see what happens.
Well, speaking of people that aren't going to get $500,000 from SEIU, Senate District 5 and Dick Anderson.
Yeah, so my boss, we've been on the podcast. So it's
great guest.
We won this seat in 2020. So Senator Anderson won by 3.1%. So, and it was a -5 at the time, in 2020. So we carried a pretty decent amount of water there. It was redistricting down to a 3. I think the problem they ran into redistricting with the coast is you hit that area between I-5 and the coast, and that's all red.
Yeah.
That's the problem that Democrats have, except for maybe that sliver of Corvallis barely, but anywhere from Corvallis to the coast or Eugene to the coast, it's all red. So it makes it very hard for them to redistricting without creating a finger that comes all the way into, Yamhill County or goes to some of these Corvallis or something like that. So it made it very difficult for them to redistrict this one,
Yeah.
especially if you're trying to move, let's say, like Betsy Johnson's old district, like the North Coast, and they're trying to redistrict that one, but they run into the same problem there. So it ended up benefiting the senator, I think, at the end of the day, and to only a negative 3.1% voter registration from a 5, and then now it's down to 2.8.
And it's so
So
yeah, trending red.
yep. So it's been trending definitely red. Boomer Wright, who's one of the House reps on the South portion of the district.
Boomdog.
It was in 2020, he was considered to be a competitive seat, and last cycle he won by like 22 points.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. I think senators raised $552,000.
One SEIU check.
Yeah. Joe Boudreau who's running against them. She's city councilor in Florence. Registered
Yeah.
last day. Seems like a nice enough lady. She's raised $75,000, and but at the end of the day, it's a race that we have to run. It's a race that the senator's really running really hard in. He's not taking it lightly, as you can tell with this fundraising effort. I mean, he's really put the wood to fundraising and brought in a lot of dollars. And I think he's been very active, more active than we could be in 20, because in 20 was a COVID year. So we couldn't really
Right.
do a whole bunch. And the coast has got a lot of seniors. So we were very cautious about, doing events and campaign events and stuff. So that made it very difficult. It's a lot of phone calls in 20, but now he's out and about, and we've done a bunch of tours, and she's not spending on TV. I think if she does, I think the senator's got a wide enough margin at this point. He's got a lot of friends in the northern part of the district. Representative Gomberg, is considered to be a moderate Dem in Lincoln City, Newport
The
area.
last Democrat on the coast.
Yeah, yeah. And the senator's from there, right? He's been a mayor in Lincoln City, all the things that I think lead. He's even got the mayors of Lincoln City's endorsement, and she's a Democrat.
Wow.
We got, I think, 12 out of the 15 mayors have endorsed the senator. So I think we've really, really did a lot of push on making sure that the locals understand and know how well of a senator he's been for them, and then and also bipartisan. He's worked on both sides of the aisle. He had a great relationship with Senator Jama in the housing. He's done a lot of work in the child care stuff, and really has, which everybody's like, why is Senator Dick Anderson, who's over 70 plus, I won't give his actual age, but why is he working on child care? Because he cares about it. I mean, he's got his granddaughter lives with him. I mean, they got a lot of things that he hears up and down the coast, and I think that's what's made him an attractive candidate. And I think that somewhere that it would be very difficult for the Democrats, I think, to come and take him out.
What would be crazy is if one of his mayor endorsements was from the mayor of Florence, where Joe Boudreau serves on city council. That would be pretty funny.
Oh, that's right. He has that. Yeah.
Oh no. Oh. Yeah, I think here's the thing about this. We went over the memo in a previous podcast, and I would say my frustration with the memo was just kind of assuming that Dick Anderson was going to lose. And what's really funny about this, the CN analysis, which is this guy, Chaz Nuttycombe on Twitter, who's got a great name, by the way. Chaz Nuttycombe is a great name. And they predict it's going to lean 2 points tilt D. So 61% likelihood that Democrat will win. So it's not a gimme, right, by any stretch. But Joe Boudreau is not Melissa Cribbins in terms of established name ID, in terms of like moderate persona. This district voted for Ron Wyden by only 5 points 2 years ago, which is not a very big margin, especially when Joe Ray Perkins is the candidate who spent basically the equivalent of $0. For president in 2020 and 2016, it voted for Trump, and it voted for Drazen by 7 points. So you have a lot of evidence, plus the registration data, plus the fundraising data, a lot of evidence that Dick Anderson can absolutely win this race. But I will tell you, the mistake that will get made is if people count this race as a victory before it's won, that's how you start to lose a race like this, right? And so,
Yeah.
props to you and Senator Anderson for working hard. Hopefully the people who are moving the money are paying attention to that too, because the risk is always that you start to have a bad election night and then you go, oh, maybe we shouldn't have not funded the race we thought was a slam dunk, right?
Yeah.
So you still have to play the whole field. You have to play the whole field because you don't know what turnout's going to be on election night. You do not know what's going to happen. Where's the October surprise that just crashes Republicans or Democrats, right? You have to play all 9 innings, all 4 quarters, all 18 holes, Brian. There's other sports that we could talk about, but I can't
Well,
think of
you
any
and I
more.
know this. I mean, I learned it, working with your dad over the years too, and just my own thought process is I run campaigns like I'm always behind.
Yeah,
No matter until literally the ballots come, and they count it and they start kicking out results. Like you have to run up until freaking Tuesday at 8 o'clock, like you're behind. And
hmm
that last vote matters. That last phone call matters. And I think you just have to. And I know the senator has been working his tail off. So he's at
yeah,
today he's at an all-day senior fair at Chinook Winds, and he sent me a photo with, handing out his yard signs and talking to seniors. And he says they get like 400 or 500 people through there, but he's there 9 to 4 talking to
wow,
voters at a senior fair, and we have them going up and down the coast. And, our campaign team is doing a great job out there. And I think they're doing the work that they need to do. But I've harpened this to my team that's on the coast, like take nothing for granted. Every
yeah,
meeting, every coffee, everything, because you never know. And to your whole point, you never know what could happen nationally that moves something some way or another. Things look good the way that we sit now, but that's now. Like the
right.
election's still a month away.
Brian, I want to go back really quick. And because what I think, I'm going to let people behind the curtain. What I'm thinking about right now, looking at the time, I'm probably going to split this into 2 episodes and just drop them on 2 different days this week. So what I want to do is give myself a good stopping point here.